Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Sadiqi, the father of all of Faith. Part 51.5 Non Retroactivity Protecting the Pure Layer from Semantic Drift. 1. The problem we now face time as a smuggler. Imagine we are archaeologists. We spend years carefully excavating a site. We document every layer of soil, every fragment of pottery, every bone. We publish our findings. This settlement was inhabited from roughly 2000 BCE to 1500 BCE. The people here made pottery with spiral patterns. They buried their dead with certain rituals. Our work is certified. It passes the gates. It becomes part of public knowledge. 50 years later, a new generation of archaeologists develops a different theory. They look at our data and say, we now interpret these patterns differently. The spirals actually represent astronomical observations. The burial rituals indicate a completely different social structure than you proposed. So far, so good. This is learning. This is how knowledge grows. But then they go further. They publish a paper saying the original archaeologists actually discovered evidence of astronomical observation, though they didn't know it at the time. Their findings really mean what we now understand them to mean. Notice what just happened. The new interpretation has reached back in time and rewritten what was originally claimed. Our careful documentation, pottery with spiral patterns, has been overwritten by evidence of astronomical observation. The pattern itself hasn't changed, but the story about what it means has been retrojected backward, as if it were always there. This is the problem of retroactivity, and it is one of the most subtle corruptions in all of human knowledge. Let us watch it happen at different scales of reality. At the microscopic scale, a biologist in 1980 observes a strange protein folding pattern. She documents it carefully. Under these conditions, the protein consistently assumes this configuration. Its function is unknown. In 2025, another biologist discovers that this configuration plays a crucial role in cellular communication. She writes in her paper, Smith's 1980 observation of what she called a strange folding was actually the first evidence of cellular signaling via protein conformation. The phrase, actually the first evidence, is doing sneaky work. It suggests that Smith really observed cellular signaling, even though she had no way of knowing that at the time. Her careful, honest documentation, function unknown, has been retroactively overwritten by later meaning. The pattern itself, still just a protein folding in a particular way. That hasn't changed. But our story about it has reached back and tried to rewrite history. At the human scale, a teacher in 1950 writes in a student's file, Maria struggles with abstract mathematical concepts. She excels at concrete applications. In 1970, Maria becomes a famous engineer. A biographer writes, even as a child, Maria showed signs of her future engineering genius. Her teacher noted her ability to apply mathematical concepts to real problems. Notice the selective reading. The teacher's full observation, both the struggle and the strength, gets reduced to only what fits the later narrative. The struggle is erased. The signs of genius are retrojected backward, as if they were always there waiting to be recognized. At the cosmic scale, in 1929, Edwin Hubble publishes his observation that galaxies appear to be moving away from us. He carefully notes the uncertainty. The data are consistent with a linear relationship between distance and velocity, within the limits of our measurements. In 2025, a textbook writes, Hubble discovered that the universe is expanding. The uncertainty is gone. The careful qualification is gone. The observation has become a discovery, and the discovery has become a fact, and the fact has been retrojected backward as if Havel always knew what he was seeing. But Havel didn't know. He observed, he measured, he documented. The meaning of his observations, the universe is expanding, emerged later, through the work of many scientists, through theoretical developments, through new measurements. That meaning is real and important, but it cannot reach back and rewrite what Hubble actually did and said. The common thread. In every case, something real and valuable happens at the later layer. New understanding, new interpretation, new meaning. But then something corrupt happens. That new understanding is retrojected backward and treated as if it were always there. The original pattern claim gets overwritten. The original evidence gets reinterpreted. The original context gets erased. The original uncertainty gets forgotten. This is semantic drift masquerading as discovery, and it must be stopped. Not because new understanding is bad, because new understanding is so good that we must not let it destroy the very thing it builds upon. What retroactivity would do to our foundation. Imagine for a moment that we allowed retroactivity. What would happen to everything we have built? The pure layer would become quicksand. A pattern certified today could be reinterpreted tomorrow in a way that changes its meaning. And if that new meaning is treated as if it were always there, then yesterday's certification becomes meaningless. The pattern's identity becomes hostage to whatever meaning happens to be fashionable next year. Anti-smuggling would become impossible. Part 4.5 installed protections against smuggling, against hidden assumptions sneaking into pattern claims. But if later interpretations can retroactively rewrite what was claimed, then smuggling becomes trivially easy. Just wait a few years, then reinterpret the old claim to include whatever assumptions you wanted all along. Historical continuity would be lost. We would no longer be able to trace how understanding evolved. Every new interpretation would erase the old one, rewriting history rather than adding to it. We would lose the ability to learn from past mistakes because the past itself would be constantly revised to fit present convenience. Certification would become meaningless. What does it mean to certify a pattern claim if that claim can be retroactively altered by later layers? Certification requires stability, a fixed point that can be returned to, checked, and verified. Retroactivity destroys that stability entirely. The layer architecture would collapse. Part 51 established that higher layers may annotate but may not alter. Retroactivity is alteration masquerading as annotation. It lets higher layers reach back in time and change what was certified at lower layers, violating the fundamental protection of the entire system. This is not abstract philosophy. This is the structural integrity of knowledge itself. If we allow retroactivity, we are building on sand. 3. What non-retroactivity preserves. Now, let us see what we protect by installing non-retroactivity. Pattern integrity. The pattern remains what it was when certified, not because later understanding is wrong, but because later understanding is later. The pattern's identity is frozen in its evidential context. The measurements, the observations, the transformations that supported its certification at that moment. Historical continuity. We can trace how understanding evolved because we preserve the original claims alongside later interpretations. We can see what people thought then and what we think now, and we can study the gap between them. This gap is where learning happens. Certification stability. Past certifications remain meaningful. If a pattern was certified in 2025, That certification stands regardless of what happens in 2030. Later discoveries may add to it, may contextualize it, may even show that it was incomplete, but they cannot erase it. Anti-smuggling integrity. The protections we built against hidden assumptions remain effective because later layers cannot retroactively insert assumptions into earlier claims. Smuggling requires hiding in the present. Retroactivity would let it hide in the past. Layer separation. Each layer does its own work. Phi no certifies structure. Phi 1 interprets meaning. Phi 2 governs institutions. These are distinct functions, and retroactivity would collapse them by letting interpretation rewrite certification across time. Learning itself. This may seem paradoxical. How does preserving the past help learning? But learning requires a fixed object to learn about. If the object itself keeps changing, we are not learning, we are just projecting. Non retroactivity gives us a stable target for inquiry. The pattern as it was, as it is, as it will be, independent of our changing understanding. 4. The critical distinction, learning versus rewriting. Now we arrive at the most subtle and important distinction in this entire part. Learning is, we now understand the pattern differently. Retroactivity is, the pattern always meant what we now understand it to mean. These are not the same. They are not even close. Learning adds new interpretations to old evidence. It says, here is what we thought then. Here is what we think now. Let us compare them and see what we have learned. Retroactivity erases old interpretations and replaces them with new ones. It says, what we thought then doesn't matter. What matters is what we think now, and we will project it backward so that history confirms us. Learning preserves the past and builds upon it. Retroactivity erases the past and rebuilds it in the present's image. Learning is cumulative. Retroactivity is destructive. Learning honors the people who came before, even when they were wrong. Retroactivity treats them as puppets who were really saying what we say now. The palimpsest. In medieval times, scribes sometimes reused parchment. They would scrape off the old writing and write new text on top. These documents are called palimpsests. Sometimes, with special imaging, we can still read the original writing underneath. Learning is like having both texts visible, the original and the overlay. We can study how meaning changed, what was added, what was scraped away. Retroactivity is like scraping so thoroughly that the original is gone forever. All that remains is the new text, pretending it was always there. We want our knowledge to be a library, not a palimpsest. We want to preserve the originals alongside the commentaries, the first drafts alongside the final versions, the wrong turns alongside the right paths. The photograph album. Imagine a family photo album. In it, there's a picture of our grandmother as a young woman. We don't know much about her life at that time. Over the years, family stories accumulate. Someone says she was a nurse. Someone else says she was a teacher. A cousin finds letters suggesting she was in love with someone before she met our grandfather. These stories are interpretations. They add meaning to the photograph. They enrich our understanding. Now, imagine someone takes the photograph and digitally alters it, adds a nurse's uniform, changes the background, removes the original context. Then they say, this is what the photograph always showed. That is retroactivity. The original evidence is altered to fit later stories. The past is rewritten to match the present. Non-retroactivity says, keep the original photograph untouched. Add all the stories you want alongside it, in captions, in commentary, in family lore, but never alter the photograph itself. 5. The mountain path. Imagine we are climbing a mountain together and leaving markers as we go. At the first ledge, we place a sign that says, "From here, the valley bends east." Later, higher on the mountain, we gain a much broader view. We see that the valley not only bends east, but also feeds into a river system connected to distant glaciers. This new view is richer and deeper, but it would be absurd to go back down and alter the meaning of the first marker as if the climber at that lower ledge had already possessed the glacier level view. The first marker was true and lawful within its scope. The later view adds to it. It does not erase its context. Non-retroactivity preserves the integrity of the climb. Knowledge climbs like this. Civilizations climb like this. Meaning deepens like this. A lower ledge is not falsified by a higher ledge merely because the higher view is broader. The record of seeing must remain layered. 6. The frozen evidential context. One of the most important ideas in this chapter is this. A pure pattern claim is frozen in its evidential context. That does not mean it is frozen as the final word. It means its certified identity remains attached to the evidence, methods, uncertainty, transformations, and refusal conditions under which it originally passed. Think of pouring clear resin around a fossil. The fossil can later be studied in richer ways. It can be scanned, compared, reclassified, embedded in new theories, or linked to new ecological stories. But the resin preserves the original found state. It prevents later hands from casually reshaping the evidence while pretending nothing changed. The evidential context is that resin. A phi-zero claim must remain attached to its traces, its replay conditions, its declared invariance, its uncertainty bounds, its time of certification, its refusal triggers, its exact scope. Later layers may surround it. They may add annotations, reinterpretations, applications, and governance outcomes. But the original certification remains frozen in that context. This is not rigidity, it is historical honesty. 7. The principle stated. Let us now state the principle clearly and simply. Higher layers may annotate, interpret, and build upon pattern claims, but they may not retroactively alter them. The pattern claim stands on its own evidence. Later layers add but do not erase. This is the non-retroactivity principle. It is the temporal firewall that protects the past from the future's rewriting. Notice what it does not say. It does not say that later interpretations are wrong. They may be right, they may be brilliant, they may transform our understanding entirely. It does not say that we cannot learn. Learning is not only allowed, it is encouraged. But learning must add, not erase. It does not say that past claims are infallible. They may be wrong, they may be incomplete, they may be superseded. But being wrong is different from being erased. A wrong claim that is preserved teaches us something. A wrong claim that is erased teaches us nothing. It does not say that we cannot revise our understanding. Revision is essential. But revision must be explicit, not retroactive. We must say, we used to think this, now we think that. Here is why we changed, not we always thought that. The temptation of retroactivity. Why is retroactivity so tempting? Why do we constantly want to rewrite the past in light of the present? Because it makes us feel smart. It makes our current understanding seem inevitable, destined, always there waiting to be discovered. It flatters us by making history a smooth path to our present wisdom. Because it simplifies. The messy, uncertain, contradictory past is hard to carry. It's easier to smooth it over, to project clarity backward, to pretend that what we know now was always known. Because it serves institutions. Organizations love to rewrite their histories to make themselves look prescient, consistent, wise. Annual reports always make last year's decisions seem brilliant in retrospect. Because it feels respectful. We want to honor past scientists by saying they really discovered what we now know. But true respect is honoring what they actually did, with all its uncertainty and limitation. Because it's easy. Preserving the past takes work. It requires maintaining archives, resisting the urge to clean up history, tolerating the messiness of multiple layers of interpretation. Rewriting is easy, preservation is hard, but easy is not the same as right. 9. The timestamp as anchor. A timestamp is not merely a bureaucratic date, it is a pattern anchor in history. When we say that a claim was certified in 2025, we are not worshipping the calendar. We are marking the evidential and conceptual context within which that certification occurred. The timestamp helps us distinguish what was then visible, what language then existed, what theories were then available, what instruments then constrained access, what classifications then operated, what uncertainty then remained. Without this anchoring, later interpretation can flatten time. A timestamp says, this claim belongs to a moment in the unfolding of inquiry. It does not trap the claim there forever, but it preserves its historical identity. 10. The archive as witness. A well-ordered archive becomes essential here. Why? Because the archive preserves the earlier layer against later drift. An archive is not only a storage device, it is a witness. It says, this is what was actually claimed. This is how it was framed. This is what was uncertain. This is what evidence existed. This is what language was used. This is what had not yet been introduced. Without archives, non-retroactivity becomes hard to enforce. Memory alone is too soft. Institutions forget. People simplify. Language shifts. This is why good archives preserve versions, not just current states. A living science needs version history. A living legal system needs precedents in their original form. A living civilization needs memory forms that do not erase earlier stages under pressure of present convenience. The archive is one of the great technical allies of non-retroactivity. 11. The beauty of non-retroactivity. There is a hidden beauty in this principle. It lets us honor our ancestors without mythologizing them. It lets us respect earlier scientists without pretending they already knew what only later became visible. It lets us preserve tradition without confusing inheritance with timelessness. It lets us learn deeply while remaining faithful to the real history of learning. This beauty is moral as well as epistemic. It teaches gratitude without fantasy. We inherit structures. We reinterpret them. We build upon them. We sometimes correct them. But we do not earn the right to erase the path that brought us here. A science with non-retroactivity has memory. A science without it becomes a self-flattering story about its present state. 12. The temporal firewall. We can now state the deeper principle in its strongest form. The pure layer is temporally protected from semantic drift. Just as interlayer handoff discipline protects Finoro vertically from meaning and governance contamination, non-retroactivity protects it horizontally across time from later reinterpretive drift. This is the temporal firewall. It says, the original certification remains. The later layers grow. History is not rewritten. That is one of the final conditions for cumulative public knowledge. 13. What we refuse. With non-retroactivity installed, we now have clear grounds for refusal. We refuse any claim that attempts retroactive reinterpretation of certified claims, treats new understanding as erasing old evidence, conflates learning with rewriting, smuggles later assumptions into earlier claims, engages in historical revisionism that erases rather than adds, violates layer separation across time, presents later interpretation as original meaning, hides the original evidential context, uses institutional authority to rewrite history. Each refusal is a protection. Each refusal says, the past is real. What happened, happened. What was certified, was certified. You may add to it, interpret it, learn from it, but you may not erase it. What comes next? Now that we have protected the past from the future's rewriting, we can turn to a different problem. What happens when claims fail? Not through retroactivity, not through leakage, but through simple, honest failure, a claim that does not match the pattern it claims to describe. This is error. An error, properly understood, is not a defect. It is a signal. It tells us where our models fail, where our access is insufficient, where our understanding hits its limits. Error is the beginning of deeper inquiry, not the end of it. But only if we understand error correctly, as pattern mismatch, not as moral failure. Only if we can acknowledge error without shame, investigate it without defensiveness, and learn from it without rewriting history. We'll reframe error as diagnostic signal. It will give us the tools to learn from failure rather than hiding from it. Because error without correction is just pain. Error with correction is wisdom. A closing meditation. There is something profound about arriving here. We began with the simplest questions. What is a pattern? How do we know when two things are the same? We built layer by layer, protection by protection, until we could talk about meaning, language, institutions, and knowledge systems without losing our grip on what is publicly certifiable. And now we have installed the final protection, the one that guards not just against smuggling in space, but against smuggling in time. The past is real. What was certified stands. Later understanding adds but does not erase. This is not conservatism. It is not resistance to change. It is the condition that makes genuine change possible. Change that we can track, learn from, and build upon, rather than change that erases its own history and then pretends to have always been there. A science that cannot remember its past cannot learn from its mistakes. A civilization that rewrites its history cannot grow in wisdom. A person who cannot say, I was wrong, cannot become wiser. Non-retroactivity is the discipline that makes cumulative wisdom possible. It protects the quiet layer, the pure pattern, the certified claim, the evidential context, from being overwhelmed by the vividness of later meaning. It says, later meanings are real, later interpretations are valuable, later institutions are necessary, but they are later. They come after. They build upon. They do not erase. This is how knowledge becomes a conversation across time rather than a series of present moments, each pretending to be the first. This is how we honor those who came before while building for those who come after. This is how we keep faith with the truth. Always. Peace be upon you.